Hello, my name is Joanna Watkins, and I have the honor of serving as Vice President of Law and Policy and General Counsel of Florida Realtors. Today, I would like to share some important information about tools we've developed to help you comply with the proposed NAR settlement related to broker commissions. The settlement has received preliminary approval from the court, but remains subject to final approval by the court later this year. Numerous critical components will impact how you do business. Two of the most discussed provisions for you to consider are: the settlement provides that MLS participants working with buyers must enter into written agreements with those buyers, and the settlement eliminates and prohibits any offers of compensation on a multiple listing service. For more detailed information on the settlement, please take a look at our webinar recorded in March by visiting floridarealtors.org/NAR-settlement. Well in advance of the settlement, the team at Florida Realtors began working with knowledgeable industry professionals to review existing products, services, and tools, and consider innovations and enhancements to how we do business. The settlement provided additional context to allow this work to be expedited. Given the changes outlined in the settlement, a comprehensive review of all forms began. Work is underway to modify existing forms to comply with the settlement provisions. It also became clear that new forms would be needed. Priority was placed on creating these new forms that are in high demand by members. But this season of rapid change requires multitasking, so rest assured, new forms and amendments are being simultaneously considered. Today, we are releasing 4 new forms: 2 compensation agreements and modification forms for each compensation agreement. These new forms aim to provide maximum flexibility to compensation arrangements in the transaction. These 2 new forms are designed to allow the participants in a real estate transaction to memorialize compensation arrangements. The first is the compensation agreement seller to buyer's broker. This new form is a compensation arrangement in which the seller agrees to compensate the buyer's broker for procuring a buyer for a listed property. The agreement specifies a term of the agreement to be expressed in a number of days. Similar to the listing agreements that you may all be familiar with using, the term of the compensation agreement will extend through the closing date if there is a pending sale and purchase contract on the property that was executed during the original term of the agreement. With this new form, compensation is owed by the seller at closing to a buyer's broker who is the procuring cause of a sale on the property, if there is an executed sale and purchase contract during the term of the agreement. There are multiple options for fields that will allow the parties to define the compensation arrangement with maximum flexibility. This arrangement goes on to provide for dispute resolution options. It even includes the option for arbitration if the parties initial for that feature. If not, the parties are free to mediate and ultimately litigate any dispute that arises from the agreement should that mediation fail. We also include the necessary disclosures that are required by the NAR settlement. A footnote is an additional feature that has been added to this compensation agreement and other forms being released today. This footnote is added to make it abundantly clear that this agreement should not be added to the multiple listing service as a vehicle to offer compensation. either the form itself or using the content of the form in any multiple listing field. Next, we have the modification to compensation agreement, seller to buyer's broker form. This form allows the parties to make changes to any material terms of the underlying compensation agreement between the seller and the buyer's broker. The next form is the compensation agreement, seller's broker to buyer's broker. This agreement memorializes any agreement between the brokers, the seller's broker, also known as the listing broker, to compensate the buyer's broker for the listed property. This agreement is property specific, and the arrangement between the brokers should relate to the listed property, not serve as a blanket agreement between the brokerages. An optional component for this form is there for the parties to name a specific buyer. The brokers have the flexibility to design this arrangement when they bring any buyer, or more narrowly, when a broker brings a particular buyer. The terms of this agreement is very similar to the previous compensation agreement that we discussed. The term is structured as a number of days, and like the prior agreement, an execution of a sale and purchase contract can extend the term of the agreement until the closing of the contract. Compensation is again designed to give the parties text fields that allow for maximum flexibility as to how they structure the compensation. When a buyer is named on the form, if that particular buyer procured by the buyer's broker closes on the deal, the seller's broker would owe the compensation. If no buyer is identified on the form, the seller's broker would agree to compensate the buyer's broker for any buyer procured by that broker who successfully closes on the transaction. This form contains similar clauses regarding dispute resolution, settlement disclosures, and miscellaneous provisions found in the other compensation agreement we discussed and in other forms in our library. Like the other form, there is also a new modification to compensation agreement, seller's broker to buyer's broker form, that can be used to amend the material provisions of the underlying agreement. Those are the new forms being released today. So now what? What's next? Well, as the summer progresses and we move closer to the August 17th implementation date set by NAR for practice changes, we will have several more form release dates. Rest assured, these releases will be well in advance of that August 17th deadline. We fully recognize that a critical part of implementing form changes is the education and training following the release. So expect July to be a very busy month. The amended buyer-broker agreement, amended showing agreement, and the amended retainer agreement will be released July 9th. On July 23rd, expect the release of amended listing agreements and several other forms. One of those forms will address what you need to do with listings and buyer-broker agreements that are in effect on August 17th that do not have the required language for settlement compliance. We are well aware that you need a tool to bring those forms into compliance. Some of you are undoubtedly wondering about the contracts for sale and purchase. It is an ongoing topic of discussion and a far more complicated legal concept than one might suspect. After all, you are not a party to the contract. So we are working on ways that the contract can be useful. But remember, a written agreement is required prior to touring a property, well before an offer is made using that sale and purchase contract. Also remember that a sale and purchase contract created by the buyer and seller can also be amended by the buyer and seller. This includes all material terms, including any compensation defined as a part of that contract. We will continue to discuss the role of the sale and purchase contract in this process. And believe me, it is a daily discussion. These discussions are productive only with the input of all of you, our members. As always, we welcome your suggestions for the forms. Suggestions for these and any forms can be submitted to forms@floridarealtors.org, or please call us on the Florida Realtors Legal Hotline at 407-438-1409. The lawyers at Florida Realtors will continue working with professional members like you who are committed to finding solutions. It is often said that the perfect should not be the enemy of the good. And I agree. While I can never promise you perfect, you all deserve so much more than just good. Thank you for your ongoing patience and your understanding as we continue to find effective, well-vetted, innovative options for the changing landscape ahead.